G'day, my name's Arushi. This is the story of my daughter, Aditi, and the life she's had to endure. I'm from a small town in Bijnor. When I was first widowed, my parents hitched me up again to a man who already had a son of his own, while I had my little girl. Now, my son and daughter used to sleep in the same room, but every single morning, as soon as she woke up, my daughter would change the bedsheets. She'd sneak around washing the old sheets in secret and then head straight for a shower. There were times when my girl would even pass out. She was getting weaker and thinner by the day. One morning, I decided to head into the kids' room early, but what I saw there, well, I was absolutely shattered and died of shame. The only thing my heart could cry out was a prayer that God should never show such a sight to any mother, because they are my daughter and my son. I had become a widow only 2 years into my first marriage. I was just 18 years old at the time because my folks had married me off when I was only 16. I was an only child, but it always felt like I was a massive burden on them, like I wasn't even their own daughter. My mum hadn't seen a scrap of happiness since the day I was born, and my dad, he was desperate for a son, so he never liked me much. He always kept his distance, didn't love me from his heart, and didn't even consider me his own. He was always taking his anger out on me. Due to some family powers or traditions, my father couldn't marry a second time, and that's exactly why he hated me so much. He was always incredibly strict, and that's why he married me off so young. My husband was a teacher at a government school, and we had a 3-year-old daughter. But one day, while coming home from school, he had a terrible accident and died right there on the spot. He left me all alone. That day was like the end of the world for me. It felt like a mountain of trouble had crashed down on my shoulders. After a few days, even my in-laws sent me packing back to my parents. I reckon I was a burden to them too. To them, I was a man-hoose woman, as if I was the one who'd killed their son. So I quietly went back to my parents' house, but they still saw me as nothing but a burden. I used to hold my daughter tight to my chest and cry my eyes out in private. After a while, they married me off again to a bloke who already had a son. Since we were both in the same boat, the marriage went through. Otherwise, I wouldn't have even received any decent proposals. His son, Abhishek, was a year younger than my Aditi. We all started living together and time just flew by. Eventually, Aditi turned 16 and Abhishek became 15. Then Abhishek's father passed away too. My second husband left us forever. He was always crook, sick, and had been struggling with all sorts of illnesses. We were just about scraping by while he was unwell, but after he passed away, it felt like all the joy had been sucked out of the house. We had our own place, so at least we didn't have to worry about rent, and I ran a tiny grocery shop from the house. One night, while we were all fast asleep, there was suddenly a massive, deafening bang. My heart absolutely sank. I was terrified. I realised the noise had come from Abhishek's room and I ran over there. I was stunned. The roof of the room had completely caved in. I was scared stiff that Abhishek might be buried under all that rubble. When I got closer and checked, Abhishek wasn't there. He must have gotten up to go to the bathroom, and that's what saved his life. I thanked God that he wasn't hurt. If anything had happened to him, how could I ever have faced his late father in the afterlife? But we didn't have the brass to get that roof fixed. The room was a total wreck, so we just left it as it was. After that, I set up my own bed in the kitchen and told the 2 kids to sleep in the one remaining room because it was freezing cold outside and there was no way anyone could sleep out in the open. There was only one proper bed and a cot in that room, and even 2 people found it a real squeeze to get any shut-eye. But they had to share. What else were we going to do? One room was taken up by the shop, and my late husband had only ever built 3 rooms in the house. Ordinarily, 3 rooms would have been fine for the 3 of us, but you've got to have a room for the shop, don't you? We didn't have a choice. We just had to make do and get on with things. One morning the boy slept in Aditi's room, and when sunrise came around, I was absolutely floored by what I saw. Abhishek was already up and tucked into his brekkie, but Aditi was still dead to the world. Now she was never one for a sleep-in, so I couldn't figure out why she was still conked out so late. She usually hits the deck running early doors. I gave her a hoy, but she didn't budge. After a bit, I popped into the room to check on her, only to find she'd completely passed out. I was panicking big time, wondering what on earth had happened to my girl. I told Abhishek to get a wiggle on and fetch the local doc immediately. When the doctor arrived at the house, he reckoned she'd just fainted because she was weak as a kitten. He said she was short on blood, anemic-like, and told me not to let her do any heavy lifting or hard yakka. Just rest and good tucker, plenty of fruit and whatnot, and she'd be right as rain. When Aditi finally came to, I went over to her and asked what the go was. She just said, "Oh, I was just sitting there and suddenly the world started spinning and I passed out." I told her to take it easy while I whipped up some brekkie for her, but when I came back with the food, she'd vanished from the room and the sheet was missing from the bed. I headed outside and found her bent over, scrubbing that sheet. I went off at her. I asked why she was washing that for when her health was in the pits, and the doc said she needed to rest. I yelled at her to get inside, eat something and have a capper so she could get her strength back. But she was stubborn as a mule. She reckoned she needed that sheet for the bed, and since we only had the one, she had to wash it. I asked her why she was so obsessed with washing it all of a sudden. The ghost of cleaning must have got into her head. It wasn't even that dirty. I told her to leave it and I'd do it myself, but she wouldn't listen to a word. She lugged it up to the roof to dry before she'd even touch her food. After that, she had a bit of food and went back to sleep for a while. Abhishek had already headed off to his job. I'd only managed to get him through high school, and now he was putting in the hard yards at a clothing shop. He was a real worker, that lad. I looked after the little grocery shop at home myself, mostly just kids coming in for lollies and bits and pieces anyway. The day dragged on. That evening Abhishek came home late and told me he'd already had a feed. Aditi was already out for the count in the room, so he just turned in too. I'd set up my cot in the kitchen, but because of the change in routine, I couldn't catch a wink. I was just laying there thinking about my second husband. He was a top bloke, honestly. He always looked after me and never once threw my first marriage in my face or gave me a hard time about it. He treated my Aditi like she was his own flesh and blood. And I never breathed a word to Abhishek about being his stepmother. He loved me more than most kids love their real mums. He always did what I told him. He was the only man left in the house, our only support. Otherwise, where would us two women go? He was doing well at his job too. I'd even told him he ought to look into some private study so he could get a decent degree in a better paying job later on, and he agreed to it. But the next morning, lightning struck twice. I was absolutely staggered. Aditi had passed out again. This time, looking at her face, it was like someone had sucked the life right out of her. She was pale as a ghost, yellow as a lemon. I called the doc back, and he gave me the same spiel about rest. He asked what I'd been feeding her. I told him everything, the usual veg and dal, and I'd been making sure she got her fruit too. She hadn't lifted a finger all day, so the doc was baffled. He said, "How's she come over all week again? You gotta take this seriously, love, or your girl's gonna kick the bucket. Topping over like that and staying out cold for hours on end, that ain't normal." The doc gave me a proper talking to before he packed up his kit and headed off. Once Aditi came around, I laid down the law. If I catch you doing a lick of work, there'll be hell to pay. But a little while later, I poked my head into her room and my jaw nearly hit the floor. What was she up to? She was back at it, scrubbing that bloody bedsheet again. This time I kept my distance and just watched her. It wasn't right. None of it was. She'd literally just woken up from a dead faint, and the first thing she does is start washing the sheets. Why? What was the go? This whole caper only started once my son began sleeping in her room. Abhishek might be her stepbrother, but they'd been raised like two peas in a pod since they were ankle biters. They loved each other like proper siblings. So what on earth was happening? My girl's health was going downhill fast, and I just sat there crying, trying to wrap my head around it. Usually a woman only gets that washed out and weak after she's had a battler, baby, and her strength is shot. But for a young lass to be passing out like this, it didn't pass the sniff test. The next day she washed the sheet again and hung it on the roof to dry. She was looking around all shifty-like, checking if I was watching. I was peeking through the kitchen window, but I made sure she didn't spot me. What was she playing at? She scurried back to bed and pulled the top cover right up to her chin so I couldn't tell if there was even a sheet underneath. I brought her some brekkie and her meds. Truth be told, the shop was going to the dogs. We didn't get any big spenders. It was just little tackers coming in for 5 or 10 cents worth of lollies. That wasn't going to keep the lights on. I was worried sick, but I didn't breathe a word to the kids. I didn't want to stress Abhishek out since he was already working his guts out at his job. But I was at my wits' end. The doc said she needed top-notch tucker, but I was struggling to even put basic dal and bread on the table. Then one day, something really weird happened. I overheard Abhishek and Aditi whispering and I couldn't make head nor tail of it. My son said, "Look, you've already made yourself real crook. This ain't going to work. If it's doing you this much damage, we've got to pull the pin on this whole thing." But Aditi shot back, "No way. I have to do this. Opportunities like this don't grow on trees. How was I to know I'd be this weak? I didn't think it'd take this much out of me." Abhishek told her, "Well, you know now, don't you? I can't go putting your life on the line for this." But Aditi wouldn't have it. It's only for another few weeks. After that, the chance is gone. I was standing there completely stumped. What were these two plotting? Then one morning I saw something that turned my stomach. Aditi had finished washing the sheet and hanging it up, and there she was, tucked away in a corner, chucking her guts up. I rushed over and said, "What's wrong with you?" She jumped out of her skin and stammered, "Oh, nothing, Mum. I just felt a bit sick all of a sudden." I snapped, "What do you mean, felt a bit sick? What are you playing at? And why are you washing these sheets every single day? What are you hiding from me? If I find out you've been up to some shonky business that drags our family name through the mud, I'll never forgive you." Aditi looked at me like I'd grown a second head. She said, "Struth, Mum, what do you want about? It's nothing like what you're thinking. Have you been watching too many soap operas, or has some busybody been filling your head with rubbish? Why would I do something like that? It's just a sheet, for heaven's sake." The sheet was just filthy, that's why I washed it. You know, I've been feeling real crook for days, and those meds are messing with my guts. If I felt like chucking my guts up, it doesn't mean anything else. My girl was talking back to me like that, so I lost my cool and clocked her one. I slapped her right across the face and she hit the deck. Just then, Abhishek barged in. He said, "Mum, what on earth are you doing? Why'd you lay a hand on her?" I turned on him and said, "Yeah, I hit her, and I should have done it ages ago. But I haven't even got to the bottom of this yet. The day I find out the truth about you two, you just wait and see." I didn't even know what was coming out of my mouth. I was just spitting out whatever my heart felt, even though I probably shouldn't have been so aggro. The secret in the middle of the night. That night, I woke up suddenly and saw the light shining under the kids' room door. What were they up to? They should have been out for the count by then. They'd told me that evening they were going to turn in early. When I crept up to the room, they weren't just awake, they were gas-bagging and sounding real chuffed about something. My son was saying, "You're real lucky, you are." My daughter replied, "Yeah, I am, but tomorrow when I feel crook again, Mum's going to be worried sick. How long are we going to keep up this lie?" He said, "Just a few more days, then it'll all be sorted." I was absolutely floored. I couldn't take it anymore and tried to open the door, but I was stunned. They'd locked it from the inside. Why the hell was the door locked? The weather was changing. They should have had it open for a bit of a breeze. I started pounding on the door, but they took a solid half hour to open up. When I finally got in, there was no one else there, and they both looked at me with sleepy eyes like they'd just woken up from a deep nana nap. I asked, "Why'd it take you so long to open the door?" They claimed they were zonked out. I told them, "Don't you lie to me, you were awake and talking." They played dumb. "Why would we be up talking at this hour? It's not like we've got a big exam tomorrow to study for. We were just sleeping, Mum." I couldn't wrap my head around their antics. I was speechless because they acted so convincing, like they'd really been asleep. I walked off, but I knew in my gut something was fishy. Bruises and dark thoughts. A few days later, I was shocked to see blue bruises on my daughter's arm. They looked like proper injuries. I asked her what happened, and she tried to brush it off, saying she'd cut herself. But listen, you cut your finger with a knife, not your arm. She was hiding something big. First the fainting, then the weird marks, then the constant sheet washing and keeping me out of the room. My mind was going to dark places I didn't want to admit. It felt like it was my fault. I'd put fire and water together. I should have known better than to let a young bloke and a girl sleep in the same room. Abhishek was his stepbrother after all, and feelings can change in a heartbeat once you're grown up. Step is still step, and I shouldn't have let him share a room. If we don't keep a sharp eye on our kids, trouble follows. Kids are naive and make mistakes without thinking. If my suspicions were right, the blame would be squarely on my shoulders. I started keeping a real close watch on him. One day I caught my son handing something to Aditi. I hid behind the wall and listened in. He said, "Here's your medicine for this trouble. Take this and everything will get right as rain." He gave my daughter those pills on the sly, and I was absolutely worried sick. What kind of pills was he handing her? What on earth was this trouble they were both trying to sort out without me knowing? And those meds, they looked a bit dodgy to me. My girl snatched them up straight away and tucked them into the corner of her dupatta to hide them. Her brother told her to take them before hitting the sack so she wouldn't pass out the next day. And fair dinkum, for 2 or 3 days she didn't faint at all. But then I reckon the pills ran out because a day later she was out cold again. Abhishek wasn't home, so I figured I'd take the chance to play detective. I very sneakily pulled that bedsheet out from under my daughter, folded it up properly, and took it to my room. I had to see what was on it. What was so important that she had to wash it every single morning the moment she woke up, even when she was feeling incredibly crook. When I spread the sheet out, I didn't see anything at first, but when I took a closer look, I was absolutely floored. The whole sheet was covered in tiny white hairs. I was stumped. I couldn't figure out what these hairs were from. They were short, white, and all over the place. I kept tossing it around in my head, watching my son and daughter's every move, but I just couldn't reach a conclusion. By then, Aditi realised I'd seen the sheet. She came and sat next to me looking real jumpy and nervous. Finally, she piped up, "Mum, where's that sheet?" I told her I've already washed it and hung it out. She started to walk away, but I grabbed her arm and held her back. I told her, "I've seen everything. Just tell me what was on that sheet. What have you been hiding from me all these days? I'm worried out of my mind and I'm starting to think the absolute worst." She sat back down and then she told me something that knocked the wind right out of me. My daughter said, "Mum, it's not at all what you're thinking. Look, we could see that things weren't going well at home. The shop wasn't making any money and Abhishek wasn't bringing in much from his job either. We couldn't find any other work that we could actually do. Then a mate of Abhishek's gave him a gig. He had these fancy, expensive-looking kittens, about 3 or 4 of them, but he couldn't look after them himself, so he paid us heaps of money to mind them for him. Abhishek was with them all day at his mate's place, but he needed some shut-eye at night, so he'd bring the kittens home to the room and I'd look after them. Those were their hairs you saw on the sheet every morning. I washed them because I knew you can't stand pets and we didn't want to bother you with it. But then I found out I'm actually allergic to cats, which is why I kept fainting every morning. The pills Abhishek gave me were just allergy meds to help me keep going. Mum, that friend of his is loaded. He was paying us $1,000, 1,000 rupees every single day for this. Today was the kitten's last day here because he's taking them to another city. We've made enough money now to finally fix the roof of that room and get a proper stock of groceries for the house.
We knew you hated pets, which is why we kept it a secret. But, Mum, the things you suspected, the things you said about us, they hit us like a dagger to the heart. I know he's my stepbrother, but he's been better to me than any real brother ever could be. He's only ever thought about us and what's best for this family, even though technically we aren't even his own flesh and blood.
His father is long gone, and he's got relatives who are absolutely loaded, filthy rich they are. He could have easily packed his bags and gone to live the high life with them, but he stayed right here with us. He didn't want to leave us in the lurch. He's always seen Aditi as his own flesh and blood sister. Never a dodgy word, never a wrong move. He does everything for us. The poor lad was slogging his guts out all day at work, and then he wanted to pull the night shift looking after those kittens too. But Aditi told him, "Listen, you've been working hard all day, get some shut-eye and I'll handle the little critters at night." That's why she was helping him out. When I heard the full story, I felt like a total heel. I was absolutely filthy with myself and felt a massive wave of regret. I'd been letting my mind rot with such dark thoughts about my own kids, but they turned out to be absolute legends, miles better than I ever gave them credit for. I'd thought things about them that no mother should ever let cross her mind. We didn't breathe a word of this to Abhishek. Aditi didn't tell him I'd ratted out their secret, because honestly, I didn't want to lose any more face in front of him. A few days later, Abhishek got the roof fixed up. The room was back in action and looking top-notch. We all put in the hard yards. Even Aditi started tutoring the local tackers, kids, at home. Slowly but surely we got back on our feet and the money troubles became a thing of the past. Life might have dealt me a dud hand at times, but it made up for it by giving me such noble, good-hearted kids. Whether they were mine by blood or not, they're both hard as nails and they know they can't just sit around on their bums waiting for a handout. They knew they didn't have a father's shadow over them and I couldn't do much on my own, so they stepped up. That's a massive thing, and I thank God every day that everything turned out right. I was worried sick over nothing, but let's be real, it could have turned out differently. If things had gone pear-shaped, where would I be? At the end of the day, what's meant to be, will be. My kids are sensible and have their heads screwed on right, but I've got a bit of advice for all the mums out there. Stay sharp when it comes to your kids. Don't make the same blue I did. Even though my kids were good eggs, I shouldn't have had a grown lad and a girl sharing a room. I got lucky because they're good kids, but if they weren't, everything would have been ruined. Keep an eye on your kids. Know what they're up to and where they're at. Give them heaps of love, but keep a bit of a firm hand too. Keep track of their mistakes, and for heaven's sake, once they're grown up, make sure they've got separate sleeping spots. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this yarn. If you like the story, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you're the first to catch the next update.